Thank you so much. My goodness, what a total delight it is to be here this evening. When I first got the call and was asked to come, I said, well, you know, what is the purpose of me? Why should I be there? Feeling, you know, like, how could I possibly talk about Greek history and Greek myth on Delos? And I was just told, just come here to be inspired. It is impossible not to be inspired. I've been here for 48 hours and I almost feel I can't speak because I'm intruding on the magic of this island. So inspired too by our two speakers who've taken us across thousands of years and allowed us to be in two times at once. So I will be brief. I've been told to keep to time so that we can move on as the moon is rising and the sun is setting. But just to talk a little bit about myths and memory and why they matter. So I'll start with a story. It's a story that's already been told this evening, but it's always worth retelling. So on a hot, balmy night like this, Zeus, the king of the gods, espied this divine creature, Leto, and was so enraptured with her, he had to have her. As you know, and as you've heard, the two made love, and she was impregnated with twins. But Hera, the wife of Zeus, was not too happy about this, as you can imagine, and condemned her to an eternal wandering from island to island. Anybody here who's given birth knows of the pangs and the pains of childbirth, and this poor woman was desperate to find somewhere safe, and we're told it's either Delos or one of the surrounding islands that welcomed her in, and here she birthed Artemis and Apollo. Artemis first, because importantly Artemis was then there to help her mother to birth Apollo. And I take so much from this story. I take it to be a story of female agency and activity and presence and pain. And of course that is the point of myths, that myths are both particular and universal, but we are destined to remember them. And we're destined to remember them because we are physiologically creatures of memory. We now realise that memory doesn't sit in a kind of chest of drawers in our brain, that it's something that we can decide whether or not we access. Memory sits right across our brains and inspires all future thoughts. So we cannot imagine the future unless we access a memory of some kind. So if we deny memory, it's not just that we're denying the past. It's not just that we're cauterizing the present, it's that we're etiolating our possibilities as a species. We're preventing ourselves from fulfilling our potential as humans. So memory is us. And not only is memory something which is particular, but scientists now tell us that we have shared memory and genetic memory. So we have ancestral intelligence. Memory is something that is passed down from one generation to another, which is why we feel instinctively we need to understand the past and we need to continue to tell stories about it. I love the fact that the word memory is a kind of sister word with muse and museum and vision and wisdom and history. And all these words have a common Proto-Indo-European ancestor, and they mean to see the world clearly. This is what memory allows us to do. It allows us to look at the world with a real clarity of sight. And I think one of the brilliant things about the ALPHA mission is that it understands there should never be a false kind of Mexican wall that is laid down both between the past and the future, but also between arts and culture and science, that these are just our ways of being in the world, and we need to understand both in order to fulfill our potential. Artemis, as we're just going to be discussing tonight and sitting under the moon of Artemis, Artemis was a pretty feisty goddess. Artemis was not somebody who suffered fools gladly. She lived by her own terms, and as we know, if men crossed her, she would, as has been said, she would hunt them down. So when Adonis dared to suggest that he was as good as a hunter as her, of course she has him killed. When Actaeon forced himself on her or espied her naked, he too died. And of course we know what happened to Agamemnon's daughter Iphigenia when Agamemnon dared to kill a sacred heart in her sacred sanctuary. And I think we need to remember that about Artemis, that when we deal with Artemis's beautiful moon, the moon is not our plaything. It's not something that we can attack on our own terms. The moon is something which it is our privilege to engage with, and Artemis would remind us absolutely of that. So Artemis was a bringer of many things, but what she wanted to be was a bringer of light to the world. And in contemporary technology, I think we all feel this. There is a lot of heat, but very little psychological and intellectual light. So if I have anything to say to you as a mission for this evening within the ALPHA mission, it's to remember the power of memory, to remember that we are creatures of memory, that we can't function unless we understand what happened in the past, unless we embrace those lives that have been described so beautifully tonight. And if we allow light to come to the world, intellectual, psychological and technical, and then we will be able to look at the moon, it will be able to look back at us, and we will be living in a world that has serious light, because memory matters, and history reminds us to remember, to think better, and myths allow us to be better in this world. So thank you to everybody who's made this evening possible. Thank you to the people who built these extraordinary surroundings that we're going to be walking through tonight. And thank you to those who understand that art and culture and science and technology and wisdom are womb mates. They are like the twins, Apollo and Artemis. They can't be divided. They have to unite in order to succeed. So let us walk on to our next destination on this night of sunset and moonlight.